Hey GED students, it's GED question of the daytime, and we are just going to finish up this concept of perpendicular lines. This is our 5th question of the day in a row on this topic because I really wanted to make sure you got through to the level of complexity that you might see on the GED. So welcome to complex. We're doing a pretty complex problem. If you haven't checked out the videos that came before, you should go check them out. And let's go ahead and try this now. Okay, so it says, find the equation of the line that runs through the origin and is perpendicular to this line. Okay, so let's just break down what they're asking me for here. They're asking me to find the equation of a line. I know that the equations of lines are most often written in what's known as the slope-intercept form of a line, y equals mx plus b. And lucky you don't have to memorize this, although it wouldn't hurt if you did, but it is on your GED formula sheet. That is the slope-intercept form of a line, or the slope-intercept equation of a line. We call it the slope-intercept form. Mathematicians do because you can see two things by looking at it. You can see the m, the slope, and the b, the y-intercept. Yeah, we're not very creative. We call it the slope-intercept form because you can see the slope and the intercept. Okay, so what makes this generic formula become a specific line? When you plug in that m and that b. So that's what we'll do. First we'll find m, then we'll find b, and then once we know what m and b are, we'll plug them in to y equals mx plus b, and that will be our final answer. And students get uncomfortable when your final answer is equation, so don't panic. It's possible to have an answer that's not just a number, but is an equation. Okay, so let's check it out. First of all, we said, what does m stand for? M is the slope of a line. And even though I don't know my line's slope, I do know the slope of this other line. Notice that they said my line was perpendicular to this line. Well, I can see this line's slope. This line has a slope of -3. The m, the number multiplying with x, is -3. Why does this help me? Because if you've been following along, you know the relationship of the slopes of perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines have slopes that are different in two ways. They're opposites, meaning they have different signs, but they're also reciprocals, meaning they're like fractions that have been flipped on their heads. So this particular line we've been given, the perpendicular line, has a slope of m is equal to -3. But I want to know the slope of my line. So what am I going to do to this -3? The first thing I'm going to do is change its sign. Remember that perpendicular lines have slopes that are opposites. So my slope will have a positive. And then the second thing I'm going to do is flip my fraction. Now you might say, Kate, that is not a fraction. That is just the number 3. How can I flip it? But remember that all whole numbers, it's like they're over 1. So it's like I have 3 over 1. So if I were to go flip this on its head, that 1 would end up on top, the 3 would end up on the bottom. So since a perpendicular line has a slope of -3, my line has a slope of positive 1/3. Again, I stole the slope from the other line since it's perpendicular, and I changed it in two ways. I changed the sign and I flipped the fraction. Opposite reciprocals. Great. So we found the m. First thing we need. Second thing we need is b. Now, I actually say the b is known, but you wouldn't know the b was known unless you know this vocab word here. Notice that they said my line runs through the origin. What is the origin? The origin is a fancy name for this kind of starting point of the xy plane, the point where the x-axis crosses the y-axis. This point's address is 0, 0. Everything starts at 0, 0 in a coordinate plane, so that's known as the origin. And I know something. If my line crosses through the origin, no matter which direction my line runs, if it crosses through the origin, that origin is the y-intercept. Why? Because a y-intercept is where my line crosses the y-axis. And the y-axis is part of this origin here, 0, 0. So I'm definitely crossing the y-axis here. So what I know then is that my b is 0. I'm crossing my y-axis. Oh, can I say that again? Yeah, I'm trying to screw it up. My y-intercept is 0 because my line is crossing the y-axis at 0. So beautiful. Now that I know my m and my b, I can plug into y equals mx plus b. Again, to take it from a generic line, all letters, to a specific line, I've got to turn m and b into numbers. Let's do it. M, the slope I found, is 1/3. Then I have my x and I have my plus. Now my b here is 0. Now, I got something to say about y equals 1/3 x plus 0. It is true and it is right, but it is not done because it is not simplified. Mathematicians always simplify. And guys, think about adding 0. I don't care if you were adding 0 to 5, it did jack. If you were adding 0 to 7, it did jack. So it doesn't matter how complicated it is, even if you have something as ugly as 1/3 x. If you add 0 to it, you know what's going to happen? Nothing. It'll still be 1/3 x. And so let us write our final simplified answer here. Instead of writing y equals 1/3 x plus 0, I will just write y equals 1/3 x. I won't bother to brag about plussing 0 because it doesn't do anything. That is the equation of the line that runs through the origin and is perpendicular to the line y equals -3x minus 2. That's your answer. Don't just write a third. Don't just write a third x. That whole equation, y equals 1/3 x, is your answer. Okay, great. If you have any questions about this or any other GED math concept, be sure to drop it in the comments. I'll do my very best to answer it.